Hello, friends and fellow skeptics. Welcome to another episode of The Nonprofits. Today's episode, we're going to talk about a popular cartoon and how it portrays parenthood. And Cindy Plaza is going to start us off. So, Cindy, what have you got for us?
Hi. Today we're going to start our show with what I only can call a masterpiece. We've often talked here about Christian outcry at changing in society, but this article from Jeremy Pryor, an ultra-conservative writer, brought to our attention by Eman Mehta. It brings us to the living hell conservative people seem to be living in. Jeremy Pryor complains about a beloved cartoon, Bluey, claiming that its depiction of father figure is a symptom of how the West has removed from fatherhood everything manly about it. These articles are from Blaze Media by Jeremy Pryor on October 6, 2024, and The Friendly Atheist by Eman Mehta on October 8th of the same year. Let's go.
Yeah, it seems a little weird that they would pick a child's cartoon to go after. There's a lot of things I find weird about this, but they always do seem to find things wrong with children's shows, don't they? I remember controversies over Barney and about the Teletubbies, too, as I recall. So I see Cynthia shaking her head. So I'm going to go to you first because I see you shaking your head. And I know you had some thoughts about one of the things that Pryor talked about was appealing to tradition. And I was hoping you can elaborate on some of the thoughts you had about that.
Well, Kelley, one glaring issue is the fallacy of appealing to tradition. Pryor's core argument rests on the belief that traditional roles supposedly ordained by biblical text should be preserved without question. He states masculinity and femininity are not social constructs, but primarily biological concepts, but are family concepts designed to create a certain dynamic, and that embracing these portrayals will shape our intuition around the essence of these roles. This is really a classic example of the naturalistic fallacy. Just because something has been historically or biblically upheld does not make it inherently right or beneficial for modern society. Pryor also assumes without evidence that traditional gender roles are inherently superior, ignoring the fact that rigid gender roles have often led to harmful dynamics within families.
Yeah, definitely. Now, John, I know that the story reminded you of something. Would you please let the viewers know what it was that it reminded you of?
Yeah, it reminds me of some of the things like desperate actions that someone trying to hang on to the last vestiges of their privilege and personal mythology that's been challenged by an evolving civilization. They just are lashing out at the rest of the advancing civilization. And since change is scary, they'd rather stick with what they know. And they also want to keep their privileged position in that old society. As other people gain the same sort of equality within the society and their citizenship, it really makes them feel like they're being left behind, mainly because they are. Conservatism does not want to conserve anything. It wants to regress back to an imagined idyllic past, retreating into roles and patterns of behavior that try to mimic their concept of a non-existent romanticized world where men were quote unquote men and women were compliant drones. So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I know that Pryor talked about the objective ideal of what fatherhood and motherhood are. And as I was reading that, I was like, well, whose objective view is he talking about? Obviously, it's not an objective view unless we all agree on it. And even if we all agreed on it, we would have to all agree on it. So it would be a subjective view to begin with, because just by all getting together and agreeing on it. So, but objective and subjective seem to be really important in Christianity. And here they're bringing it out even more. And I don't know that they realize that there really is no objective fatherhood or motherhood. I mean, the idea of that to me was really crazy. I know, Cindy, there were a lot of things in this article that made you want to talk about. But what would you say were some of the most important things that you got out of the article?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to ask him what part of our biology says that men are supposed to be wearing blue and women pink, because I don't see the link between the two. But yeah, there's at least half a dozen things I wanted to talk about after reading this article. The total lack of solution offered to his perceived problem, his views on gender, how he believes Abraham is the meta father, as he called him, showing a very, very selective view of the Bible, or how he based his entire opinion on the show and his will to write an entire article about it on a 3-minute clips. But instead, I wanted to address the fear that transpires from this article. And Jonathan alluded to it a little bit earlier. I feel that at its heart, conservatism is fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being useless in our society, and fear of being irrelevant. And since we are a social creature, we need to feel like we are part of the group. So as atheists dealing with people who hang strong onto their beliefs, we know this feeling too well because we hear about it every week. And we also experience it in other topics in our lives because we are always wrong about something, and being wrong hurts in a way. And when people are afraid of being wrong and they're invested so much in their view, they can react strongly to opposing ideas. And there's a reason why this happens, in my opinion, disproportionately in the US compared to Europe, for example, because in the US, people link their own sense of identity to their beliefs, and we call that identity politics in the US. So when your sense of self is so strongly linked to your beliefs, any attack to your belief or contradiction to your beliefs feels like an attack on your person, on a physical attack. And just like a physical attack would trigger defense mechanism, like, trying to either avoid or trying to defend yourself, contradicting ideas will make those people often dig deeper in their position. And that's what feeds into the conservative movement. So as people who try to be rational thinkers, I think we need to do a better job at explaining people, you are not your beliefs. You can change your beliefs and it won't change you as a person. And that's something we need to express a little bit more, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was really insightful. Honestly, that was great. One of the things that that got me that really stood out in the article was Pryor mentioned that how important symbols were in molding kids' minds. And I thought, well, isn't that what the church is? I mean, the church is guiltier than any cartoon, or as guilty, and they've been doing it for centuries. It's almost like the cartoons actually got the idea from the church. So I thought it was really interesting that he would bring it up and be complaining about, oh my goodness, these cartoons are using symbols to mold kids' minds. And I don't even think for a minute that he even thought about that's exactly what the church was doing, right?
Yeah.
So I know that conservatives like Jeremy Pryor, the author of this article, are not always doing what they are saying, that they're doing, as opposed to what they're actually doing. Do you have any thoughts on that, John?
What really bothers me about that is that hypocrisy knows no bounds when it comes to a cultural shift. One of the rhetorical techniques that a lot of these people use is blaming their opponents with things that they're doing or being hypocritical. But it's not just hypocritical, it's a technique used to distract from their own misdeeds. So even though they are the ones who are indulging in massive indoctrination of children, they're always claiming that the other side is doing it. So, and not to say that we're both doing it, but to say that only the other side is doing it. And that means that's a dirty trick in dark psychology to try and shift the attention or the focus from your particular point of view, which could be nasty, to the other person's point of view, which if it wasn't nasty, you're going to make it nasty. You're going to say it's what you're doing, which is the nasty stuff. So it's like, come on, people, stop trying to deceive people. And just, if you have an ideology or if you have a way of thinking about something, just be honest about it. And then if you're honest with yourself about it, be honest with everybody. If you can't defend it, maybe you ought to consider changing it. But, that's not what they do. They're going to defend it at all costs. And that means being hypocritical. That means lying a lot. lot, that sort of thing, just to maintain your position, which you have too much emotionally invested in it to give it up right at the moment until you're forced to for some other reason. So that's one of the things that just really irks me about some of these people, their need to preserve their heritage that never really existed in the first place, because it's all an invention of their own ideas of what history was and what actually happened. All of us are guilty of a little bit of bias, especially historically, but a lot of us have the facts wrong. But most of us, especially atheists and humanists, when we're told our facts are wrong, we say, oh, really? Oh, okay. Let me read that first, because I'm obviously wrong about many things about this. If I have, different facts that don't exist, let me go find the other parts of that I'm not looking at. And so we always admit, okay, I didn't know that, and go on from there. Whereas people who are entrenched in their positions, they're not willing to look at any other data, because they will demonize anybody who does look at any other data, because they have too much invested. Their identity, but not just their identity, their social standing and a bunch of other stuff are also attached to it. And that makes it dangerous for them to try and change.
Yeah, that's why it's often hard to talk to theists, at least in my experience. When you attack the religion, they take it personal, as if you're attacking them, because they think that they are their religion. It's kind of difficult sometimes to talk to them. Cynthia, there was something I probably should have brought up first at the very beginning of this segment, and it was about the name of the cartoon character to begin with, Bluey. It didn't come from the creators trying to be gender neutral, did it?
No. And actually, Hammond Meta pointed out in his article that Bluey isn't blue because the creators are trying to push back against like a gender stereotype. Bluey is a blue heeler, which is a type of Australian herd dog. So this completely deflates Pryor's argument, showing that much of his critique is based on an overanalysis and misplaced assumptions. Listen, I think it's like very interesting how you would hear from the right, there are certain roles that, genders are supposed to play just because tradition dictates, right? Girls are supposed to be represented as pink, as like he talks about in the article. Boys are supposed to be represented in blue, and there's other things like the pushback against Bluey's dad Bandit, that he's not supposed to show as much affection to his pups as he does, and if you do that, then you're not a real man, or whatever that means. I don't understand any of that.
That one kind of irks me a lot, because I was a stay-at-home husband, so that one kind of just blew me away. But I'm sorry to jump in on you, Cynthia. Go ahead.
And to be honest with you, Kelley, as an anecdote, like even though my mom worked a 9-to-5, my dad had his own business, so he had his own like school bus company. So, and he used to drive for Catholic area schools. So if I was at school, and let's say for instance I got sick, or if I had to come home or what have you, guess who I was staying with? My mother did not leave work.
Yeah.
I stayed with my dad. And I can even think of like a lot of different instances growing up where, I did a lot of things with my dad, like going out to movies, going to the play park, going to different parties, just different things I did with my dad. And my dad didn't have a problem like hugging me and kissing me and told me he loved me. I mean, and to be honest, like when he thought I didn't need it as much when I became a teenager, I had to check him real quick and say, listen, I need that from you, sir. Okay, I need all that. You can't feed me all that love and then try to take away. I'm gonna box you, And I think that's even something that I try. I'm serious, John. That's serious. But and I think that's even something that I try to like instill in my child, like that whether it's your father or whether it's me or family members, it doesn't matter what gender you are, what you identify as. We're about love. We're a family. We want to love you. We want to hold you. We want to keep you safe. And how that is supposed to be displayed to you doesn't have to be like this aloof thing, like some type of character from a 1950s 1950s sitcom. That's ridiculous to me. So I think like you all said it earlier, that in essence, Pryor's conservatism is just an unwillingness to adapt to modern understandings of fatherhood and an over-reliance on rigid patriarchal interpretations of the Bible. And from my standpoint, the Bible is not a good book to use to rear children. Like, God is a terrible character to pattern your parental ideology after. There's a shirt that a friend of mine created from another friend that was on a podcast that said Jesus was thrown in the bus so that God could get clout. Okay. And I could just remember like all my Bible lessons back in the day about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night that he was crucified, crying and sweating blood because he knew of the pending torture that he was going to go through to save the world, which never really saved the world. That's another show. But you know, if you could just think about like a so-called loving father is going to send you to get whipped, how many times with the cat of nine tails? Like 30 lashes with the cat of nine tails. I mean, like, do you? Scourge. Yeah, they're like, right, like, like the cat of nine tails is like these whips that have like little metal rods that have hooks in them that could like stick you in your flesh. I mean, pricking, piercing with a sword, nail you to a cross. Like, that's horrible. But I'm a loving child, no. So I need Pryor to go ahead and get, as we say in my culture, have several seats.
Cynthia, if you need it, I'm willing to give you a hug anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate. I need that, Jonathan. I will come all the way down to where you are just to get a hug. Thank you.
Cynthia, I know Mr. Pryor expressed a lot of very conservative ideals in this. Do you think it's fair to judge a children's cartoon by those standards?
No. No. I mean, because it's like, listen, children's cartoons are going to be whatever that creator is going to do in order to appeal to a certain demographic of kids, right? You know, Bluey is basically a harmless cartoon out of Australia, which I know that every time that it comes on, I hear my kid going, Mom, Dad, like, you know, bingo, like he is into that thing, right? And I remember like watching kids cartoons and kids shows like Mr. Rogers, and I even remember watching Barney back in the day and all this other stuff. And like, I still sing the I Love You song from time to time. I mean, like, I think that his idea of, okay, well, like, because I have it in my head that, you know, families are supposed to look like this and fathers are supposed to treat their kids like this. And it's based on this arbitrary standard that was set long time ago that is not rooted in anything scientific. It's just based on whatever type of patriarchal value that you have at that particular time is ridiculous. And I really need for him to allow creators to create the shows that they want to create, which actually Bluey's dad is showing healthy affection towards his pups, just like parents should show healthy affection towards their children.
All right. Cindy, you brought us into this segment. You want to take us out, and I want to give you the last word.
I want to answer your last question with a slightly different take. I think it's fair to judge cartoons in general, and they are heavily judged, and that's fine. That's entirely normal. But I think it's fair to compare this antiquated view against nothing. I don't think there's anything today that needs to be judged in regards to this view. I just realized that I've felt for a very long time that the idea of heaven was extremely childish to me. That's something that I've said quite often, and it's because it's extremely simple. You know, everyone's happy, everyone's alive, and you know, it's extremely basic.
Ask Kat Kerr, Cindy. Ask Kat Kerr. She'll tell you all about heaven in her review.
Yeah.
Football games, everybody wins.
Right.
Yeah, and this,
what's the point?
Gender roles coming from the Bible, it's the exact same thing. It's extremely basic. It's men do this, women do that, because it's easy to explain, easy to understand, easy to remember, easy to enforce, and it's just as relevant today as the principle of heaven is. It's nonsense.
All right, great. And hey, you know what? There's a lot of great merch over at tiny.cc/ACA merch. You should go check some of it out. And if you'd like to hear more from the nonprofits, all you have to do is click on this link below.